Hello everyone. A little book review here, and I want to review a book called Striking Distance. And the subtitle is Bruce Lee and the Dawn of Martial Arts in America by a chap called Charles Russo. The foreword is by a lady called Shannon Lee, who is the daughter of Bruce Lee. And it's got a good picture of Bruce Lee on the cover, and as everybody knows, I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. I always say that. But why would you want to read a book like this? So first of all, what this book is, first of all, it's very well written. It's by a guy called Charles Russo, who's himself an award-winning journalist. And when you read this book, it's actually about the history of Bruce Lee coming to America in San Francisco, which is actually the land of his birth. So he was actually born in San Francisco. His parents went back to Hong Kong, and then at the age of about 18 or so, I think 18 or so, 18 or 19, he was sent back to San Francisco, partly because he was having trouble in Hong Kong. He was getting into a lot of street fights with gangs, and his parents said, right, we're packing you off to San Francisco to live with your auntie in Bel Air. No, not quite. So he went off with his aunt. I think he must have, I think he had some relatives there, but he basically had to go and sort of get out of trouble. But this is Bruce Lee we're talking about, who was already highly talented, incredibly talented at a particular type of martial art called Wing Chun. Now, why this book is quite interesting is it's not really just a book about Bruce Lee and the early days of martial arts in America, before martial arts became a thing. And it's before Bruce Lee became any kind of household name. This is Bruce Lee, the 19-year-old, very talented, but a Chinese immigrant washing dishes in a restaurant, in a school, where he's been sent because he's been kicked out of, sent away from Hong Kong by his parents. And he is training with young guys in car parks, and he's formulating his own ideas about the world and what he wants to do with his life. So this is a Bruce Lee from that time. So firstly, it's well written. It's written by a journalist, and anybody who's interested in the history of an immigrant people and how immigrant communities develop. This is actually a very interesting book. It's also it's almost like a historical book about San Francisco and America and how it treated immigrants initially. And the way that it treated Chinese people was not very well. Chinese were excluded from loads of things, and there were bills and laws passed to stop Chinese people from coming to America, even though they were encouraged. They were encouraged to come to America. They worked on the railroads, they worked on things and in setting down the infrastructure, and then they were excluded from coming to America. And it's a sort of coming of age story of the Chinese population, because by the time Bruce Lee came to a kind of age where he was finding his destiny, America decided to drop certain laws as well. So it dropped a lot of its Chinese exclusion laws in about 1964, 1965. And that's the age where Bruce Lee suddenly decided, I want to be a movie star, or I want to go into movies. And the book ends with Bruce Lee finally taking a step at a screen test and announcing that he is Bruce Lee, and this is what he's going to do at screen test. And not long after that, he became probably the first global third world when I say third world superstar, non-white superstar. And it shows, the book is good because it shows how, he was not, the global icon that he is now. He was actually a young upstart, not very well liked by a lot of people in the Chinese community. A lot of the Chinese masters thought he was a little brash upstart, didn't show respect to people, and he had his own ideas. He had his own ideas about breaking out of tradition and doing your own thing. So in that sense, he was very much a kind of, innovator, and a lot of the old traditionalists didn't like that. But he talks, if you're interested in martial arts, you'll love this book because, you know, it's talking, it shows you how martial arts kind of developed in the United States and how it became popularized. It also, if you love Chinese culture, you'll love this because it's, you know, it's really talking about how Bruce Lee came over and how the Chinese community developed, and how also in certain parts of San Francisco in China, it kind of degenerated. Once there was a more open society, the old Chinatown and the culture of it sort of, you know, disappeared. Interestingly, Bruce Lee also wrote a kind of what they call a treatment for a series called The Warrior, about Chinese communities in America in the late sort of 19th century. And that's actually quite interesting because it shows you a lot about some of the history and the gangs that developed and the how power developed in these areas. So that's available, I think, on Amazon Prime. But yeah, this is, I like this. And the foreword is by Shannon Lee, but it's like a one-page, you know, a kind of prologue, I think, you know, where she, you know, gives her, you know, sort of opinion about the book, and it's favourable. But it's a good book. It's not just a book for martial artists or fans of Bruce Lee. It's about basically the early immigrant community, how it develops, how power develops in communities, how communities evolve, and, you know, how they, you know, people want to try and hang on to their culture, and other people want to innovate and move forward. And I guess it does that in this kind of really using the vehicle of Bruce Lee, because that's, you know, he just had to break out of the mold that he was put in. So I think it's quite good. It's called Striking Distance by Bruce Lee and the Dawn of Martial Arts in America. It's certainly more than just a martial arts kind of history. It's like I said, it's about how a community develops as well. If you're interested, I enjoyed it, so definitely give it, you know, if any of those appeal to you, it'll be quite worth looking at. Okay, thanks.